Thunder cracked across the mountains as an enormous white serpent emerged from the ancient temple ruins, its crystalline scales gleaming like starlight against the storm-dark sky. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The creature's eyes blazed with an otherworldly sapphire fire, and its massive body moved with such force that the earth trembled beneath the gathered crowd. "You dare return here?" The python's voice resonated through the temple grounds, each word dripping with heartbreak and fury. "After everything we shared, after I gave you life itself." The young man who stood before the great serpent couldn't meet those burning eyes, his shoulders trembling as tears streamed down his face. But what happened next would change both their destinies forever. This is a tale of love, betrayal, and redemption that began 25 years ago, in a place where magic still lingered in the shadows of an ancient world. Deep in the mystical valleys of the Himalayas, where prayer flags danced in the wind, and ancient monasteries clung to mountainsides like eagles' nests, lay the hidden village of Shangri-La. Unlike its mythical namesake, this Shangri-La was very real, a place where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds grew thin, where legends walked in broad daylight, and where magic still sparkled in the corner of one's eye if they knew where to look. The village was protected by steep cliffs on 3 sides and a dense forest of rhododendrons on the 4th, their blood-red blooms giving the woods their local name, the Crimson Forest. Beyond the forest stood the ruins of an ancient temple complex, its weathered stones holding secrets that the villagers spoke of only in whispers. They said the temples were home to the Guardian, a massive white python with scales like moonlight and eyes that held the wisdom of centuries. It was on the night of the winter solstice, when the moon hung full and heavy in the sky like a silver coin, that everything changed. The bitter wind howled through the mountains, carrying with it the sound of drums from the village's festival. The people of Shangri-La gathered in the central square, their faces illuminated by paper lanterns as they celebrated the longest night of the year. Children ran through the crowd with sparklers, their laughter mixing with the music that echoed off the mountains. Among the celebrants was Master Chen, the village's most respected healer, his weathered face creased with concern as he made his way through the festivities, his mind troubled by what he had witnessed earlier that day. He'd been gathering herbs in the Crimson Forest when he'd heard it, a sound that had no place in these mountains. A baby's cry, weak but unmistakable, coming from the direction of the ancient temples. Master Chen had spent his entire life in these mountains. He knew their dangers, their secrets, and most importantly, their taboos. The temples were forbidden ground, protected by both human law and divine decree. But the cry he'd heard haunted him, tugging at his healer's heart like an insistent thread. As the festival reached its peak, Master Chen slipped away from the celebration. With only a small lantern to light his path, he made his way through the Crimson Forest. The rhododendrons loomed above him like silent sentinels, their shadows dancing in the lantern light. The bitter wind cut through his thick woolen tuba, but he pressed on, following the memory of that desperate cry. The temple ruins emerged from the darkness like a ghost city. Crumbling stupas and weather-worn statues stood sentinel under the starlight, their shadows stretching long and dark across the snow. Master Chen's breath fogged in the frigid air as he moved deeper into the complex, his footsteps crunching softly in the fresh snow. Then he heard it again, a tiny whimper barely audible over the wind. Following the sound, he came to the central temple, its massive doors hanging askew on ancient hinges. The cries seemed to be coming from inside. Master Chen hesitated at the threshold, remembering all the warnings and legends about this place. But another weak cry decided him. Whatever consequences might come, he couldn't leave a child to die in the cold. The interior of the temple was surprisingly warm, protected from the bitter mountain winds. His lantern light revealed worn stone floors and walls covered in faded murals depicting scenes from ancient myths. The baby's cries echoed off the high ceiling, leading him deeper into the temple's heart. In a small chamber that might once have been a meditation room, Master Chen found the source of the cries. A tiny bundle lay on a stone altar, wrapped in what looked like silk, but shimmered strangely in the lantern light. As he approached, the baby's cries grew stronger, as if sensing help was near. Master Chen reached for the bundle, but before his fingers could touch it, a sound froze him in place, the soft whisper of scales on stone. His lantern light caught a flash of white, like moonlight given form, and then it appeared. The guardian emerged from the shadows like a river of living moonlight, its massive body coiling around the chamber's pillars. Its scales gleamed with an inner radiance, and its eyes, a brilliant, impossible blue, fixed upon the healer with ancient intelligence. Master Chen fell to his knees, his heart pounding in his chest. "You show great courage," the guardian spoke, its voice resonating through the chamber like distant thunder, "or great foolishness to enter my domain." Master Chen kept his head bowed, his voice trembling but determined. "Great guardian, I heard a child's cry. As a healer, I could not ignore it." The massive python's head lowered until it was level with the kneeling man. "And what would you do with this child, healer? Would you take it to your village, where they fear and shun all that they do not understand?" "I would give it a home," Master Chen replied, finding strength in his conviction. "I would give it love and care, as any child deserves." The guardian was silent for a long moment, its sapphire eyes unblinking. Then, to Master Chen's surprise, it let out what sounded almost like a sigh. "Your heart speaks truth, healer. But this child is different. It carries a destiny that your village could not comprehend, let alone nurture." The baby chose that moment to let out another cry, louder this time. The guardian's massive head swung toward the sound, and Master Chen was stunned to see something like tenderness in those ancient eyes. "This child was left here for a reason," the guardian continued. "The temples have chosen it, and I have chosen it as well. It will stay with me." Master Chen's healer's instincts rebelled at the thought. "But, great guardian, how can you? A child needs milk, warmth, human touch." The guardian's laugh was like distant bells. "You think I have survived countless centuries without learning a few tricks, healer? This temple holds magic. Older than your oldest stories. The child will thrive here under my protection." As if to prove its point, the guardian's scales began to glow with a soft, pearl-like light. The light spread through the chamber, warming the air and creating a gentle humming that seemed to soothe the baby's cries. But Master Chen hesitated, torn between his duty as a healer and his respect for the ancient being before him. The village should know. They should understand. They should know nothing. The guardian's voice grew stern. This child's destiny must unfold away from human interference. However, its eyes softened slightly. "You may return from time to time to assure yourself of the child's welfare, but you must swear to tell no one of what you've seen here tonight." Master Chen looked at the baby, now sleeping peacefully in its strange, silken wrappings, then at the massive creature that had appointed itself its guardian. Against all logic, he felt his fears easing. There was something in the guardian's eyes, something that spoke of not just power, but wisdom and compassion. "I swear," he said finally, bowing deeply, "by all that I hold sacred, I will keep this secret." The guardian nodded, its scales shifting like moonlight on water. "Then go, healer. Return to your festival, and know that you have played your part in a story that will echo through these mountains for generations to come." As Master Chen made his way back through the crimson forest, the baby's cries now replaced by the winter wind, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had witnessed the beginning of something extraordinary. Behind him, in the ancient temple, the guardian coiled protectively around the sleeping child, its scales casting a gentle, nurturing light. And so began a bond that would challenge the very foundations of what was possible, a bond between an immortal guardian and an abandoned child, each destined to change the other in ways that neither the mountains nor the stars could have foreseen. High in the Himalayas, where ancient prayer flags danced with mountain winds and mist clung to temple spires like dragon's breath, the village of Shangri-La prepared for its most sacred celebration. The winter solstice festival wasn't just a marking of the year's longest night. It was a time when the veil between the human and spirit worlds grew thin, when ancient magic stirred in forgotten temples, and when miracles were said to be possible. The village itself was a testament to human perseverance, carved into the mountainside like a jewel set in stone. Traditional houses with their colorful prayer wheels and intricate wooden carvings climbed the terraced slopes, while ancient stupas stood sentinel at each cardinal point, their golden spires catching the last rays of the setting sun. Master Chen, the village's revered healer, watched the festival preparations from his herb garden with mixed emotions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. At 72 years old, he had witnessed more winter solstice celebrations than anyone else in Shangri-La. But this year felt different. The air itself seemed charged with possibility, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. In anticipation, the village square buzzed with activity as families hung paper lanterns and strung prayer flags between houses. Children darted through the crowds, their laughter echoing off the stone walls as they helped carry decorations and steal tastes of the festival foods being prepared. The scent of burning sage and incense mixed with the aroma of momos and butter. Tea, creating an atmosphere that was both sacred and celebratory. In the center of the square stood the village's most precious monument, the Lotus Pillar, an ancient stone column carved with the history of Shangri-La's founding. According to legend, it had been placed there by the first settlers who had followed a white serpent to this hidden valley. The serpent, they said, had led them to safety during a great storm, and in return they had promised to maintain the balance between the human and spirit worlds. The village chief, Dorje, a man whose broad shoulders and weathered face spoke of a lifetime in the mountains, supervised the final preparations. His wife, Pema, moved through the crowd with quiet grace, her hands constantly in motion as she helped adjust decorations and solved small crises before they could become large ones. They were expecting their first child, and the whole village saw this as a blessing from the mountain spirits. Pema's pregnancy had been difficult, but she carried herself with unwavering dignity, one hand often resting protectively over her swollen belly as she went about her duties. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the village square, the elders gathered to begin the opening ceremonies. They wore their finest traditional robes, each garment adorned with symbols that told stories of their family lineages and their connections to the mountain spirits. Master Chen took his place among them, his medicine pouch hanging heavy at his side. Inside were herbs and crystals gathered from the highest peaks, blessed by moonlight and morning dew. But his most precious possession was something he kept secret, a small piece of shed snakeskin that shimmered like mother of pearl, found years ago near the forbidden temples. The ceremony began with the lighting of the sacred fire in the center of the square. As the flames reached toward the darkening sky, the elders began to chant, ancient words that spoke of the bond between humans and spirits, of promises made and kept through generations, of the delicate balance that kept their world in harmony. Young dancers moved around the fire, their movements telling the story of Shangri-La's founding. They depicted the great storm that had driven their ancestors into the mountains, the appearance of the white serpent that had guided them to safety, and the building of the first temples. Their shadows, cast by the fire, seemed to take on lives of their own, dancing on the village walls like spirits come to witness the celebration. But as the ceremony reached its peak, something unexpected happened. The flames of the sacred fire suddenly shifted, turning from orange to an otherworldly blue. The prayer flags that crisscrossed the square began to move in a wind that shouldn't have been possible, and for a moment every prayer wheel in the village began to spin on its own. The dancers froze, the drummers fell silent, and every eye turned to the lotus pillar. In the strange blue light of the fire, the ancient carvings seemed to move, telling new stories that hadn't been there before. Master Chen stepped forward, his practiced eye reading the shifting symbols. "The balance," he whispered, but in the complete silence his words carried to every corner of the square. "The balance is shifting." As if in response to his words, a sound echoed through the village. Not quite music, not quite voice, but something in between. It seemed to come from the direction of the forbidden temples, where the white serpent was said to still dwell. The sound carried with it a feeling of both warning and promise, of endings and beginnings. Pima, standing near the sacred fire, suddenly gasped and clutched her belly. The baby, it seemed, had chosen this moment to begin its journey into the world. As the villagers rushed to help her to the birthing house, the strange blue flames returned to their natural color, and the prayer wheels gradually slowed to a stop. But something had changed. Everyone who had witnessed the event knew they had seen something significant, even if they didn't understand its meaning. The elders gathered in hurried consultation, their voices low and urgent as they discussed the signs and portents. Master Chen remained by the lotus pillar, his fingers tracing the carvings that had shifted in the blue light. The stories they had shown spoke of a time of great change, of a child who would bridge the gap between worlds, and of choices that would reshape the very nature of magic in the mountains. As the night deepened and the festival continued around him, Master Chen's thoughts turned to the forbidden temples and their mysterious guardian. He alone in the village knew the truth about the white serpent, not just the legends, but the reality of its power and purpose. He alone understood that what had happened tonight was more than just a sign or portent. It was a beginning. In the birthing house, Pema's labor progressed as the festival reached its peak outside. The timing was seen as auspicious. A child, born on the winter solstice, was said to be blessed by both worlds, human and spirit. But as the night wore on, complications arose. The baby seemed reluctant to enter the world, as if waiting for something. The midwives did everything they knew how, burning sacred herbs and chanting prayers passed down through generations. But still, Pema struggled, her strength beginning to fade as the hours passed. Finally, they sent for Master Chen, hoping his knowledge of both healing arts and ancient magic might help. As he made his way to the birthing house, the strange sound from the forbidden temples echoed through the village again. This time, it was clearer, almost like a lullaby carried on the wind. The moment it reached the birthing house, something changed. Pema's labor eased, and within moments her child was born. It was a girl, small but perfect, with eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. When she took her first breath, every prayer wheel in the village began to spin again, but gently this time, as if in welcome. Master Chen, holding the newborn while the midwives tended to Pema, felt a profound sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. The child was named Yeshe, meaning wisdom in the ancient tongue. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of rose and gold, the village celebrated both the end of the winter solstice and the birth of their chief's daughter. But Master Chen, watching the sun rise over the forbidden temples, knew that this was more than just a celebration of new life. It was the beginning of a story that would change everything. A story of two children, one born to bridge worlds and one left at a temple door, whose destinies would intertwine in ways that would reshape the very fabric of magic in the mountains. As the villagers returned to their homes, tired but happy from the night's celebrations, Master Chen made his way to his small house near the edge of the village. Inside, he carefully recorded everything that had happened in an ancient book, passed down through generations of healers. On a fresh page he wrote, "On this winter solstice night, as the veil between worlds grew thin, two beginnings were set in motion. One in the village, witnessed by all, celebrated with joy and hope. The other, yet to come, will begin in shadow and silence, but will burn just as bright." The balance shifts, the wheel turns, and a new chapter in our story begins. The years passed like autumn leaves in the wind, and the child, whom the guardian had named Kai, meaning ocean in the ancient tongue, grew into a curious and vibrant boy of 7. His laughter echoed through the temple halls, bringing warmth to stones that had known only silence for centuries. The guardian watched over him with unwavering devotion, teaching him the secrets of the temple and the magic that still lingered in its weathered walls. But fate, like the mountain winds, has a way of changing direction when least expected. It began on a spring morning, when the rhododendrons of the crimson forest blazed with unprecedented brilliance. Master Chen, who had kept his promise to visit regularly over the years, arrived at the temple with troubled eyes and a heavy heart. The guardian sensed his distress before he spoke. "What darkness clouds your spirit, old friend?" the great serpent asked, its sapphire eyes studying the healer's worn face. Master Chen looked at Kai, who was practicing his meditation in a patch of sunlight before turning back to the guardian. "A shadow has fallen over Shangri-La," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The mountain sickness has returned." The guardian's scales shimmered with concern. The mountain sickness was no ordinary ailment. It was a mysterious malady that appeared once every generation, stealing the breath from its victims and turning their dreams to nightmares. According to legend, it was the price humanity paid for an ancient transgression against the mountain spirits. "How many?" the guardian asked, its voice resonating with ancient power. 12 children so far," Master Chen replied, his hands trembling, "including the village chief's only daughter. Maya, my medicines, they do nothing. The children waste away, their spirits trapped between this world and the next." He hesitated, then added, "There are whispers in the village. They speak of the old legends, of the cure that lies within the temple of the moon lotus." The guardian's body tensed, its scales catching the light like frozen lightning. The temple of the moon lotus was a forbidden place, even to one as powerful as the guardian. It lay in the highest reaches of the mountains, in a valley that time itself seemed to have forgotten. "You know what you speak of is impossible," the guardian said, its voice heavy with ancient memories. "The temple of the moon lotus is protected by magic older than the mountains themselves. None who have sought it have returned." But Kai, who had been listening intently while pretending to meditate, suddenly spoke up. "But you know where it is, don't you?" His young voice carried the innocent courage that only children possess. "You could find it." The guardian turned to Kai, its eyes softening with love and concern. "Little ocean," it said gently, "some paths are forbidden for a reason. The magic that guards the moon lotus is not like the gentle powers that flow through these temples. It is wild, unforgiving. It cares nothing for good intentions or pure hearts." But Kai stood up, his small frame straight and determined. "You always tell me that magic responds to love," he said, "that the greatest power comes from wanting to help others. These children, they're like me, aren't they? The same age I was when you found me. Don't they deserve the same chance you gave me?" The guardian was silent for a long moment, its ancient eyes studying the boy it had raised from infancy. In Kai's face, it saw not just determination, but something deeper, a wisdom that seemed to echo from ages past. Master Chen watched the exchange with growing hope. "There is more," he said quietly. "The legends speak of a prophecy. They say that when the mountain sickness returns, a child raised by magic itself will have the power to reach the moon lotus. A child whose heart bridges the world of humans and spirits." The guardian's scales rippled with recognition. It had known from the moment it found Kai that the boy was different. His ability to see the magic that flowed through the temple, to speak with the spirits that still lingered in its halls. These were not ordinary gifts. The journey would be perilous, the guardian said, more to itself than to the others. The path to the moon lotus is guarded by the 4 trials, tests that probe not just strength and courage, but the very essence of one's soul. Kai stepped forward, placing his small hand on the guardian's moonlit scales. "But I wouldn't be alone," he said softly. "You would be with me. We could face the trials together." The guardian felt something stir in its ancient heart. A mixture of pride, fear, and something else it couldn't quite name. Perhaps this was why fate had brought Kai to its temple all those years ago. Perhaps their bond was meant for something greater than either of them had imagined. "The first trial," the guardian said slowly, "is the trial of memory. It forces you to face your deepest fears and regrets. The second is the trial of truth, where every lie you've ever told becomes a physical barrier. The third is the trial of sacrifice, where you must be willing to give up what you hold most dear. And the fourth It paused, its voice growing heavy. The fourth is the trial of love, the most dangerous of all. Master Chen leaned forward. What makes the trial of love so dangerous? Because it requires you to break your own heart, the guardian replied softly. To save what you love, you must be willing to lose it forever. A heavy silence fell over the temple chamber. Outside, the wind whistled through the ancient stones, carrying with it the distant sounds of the suffering village. Kai looked at the guardian, his young face set with determination. Those children, he said, they don't have a choice about losing what they love. The mountain sickness is taking everything from them. But we have a choice. We can help them. The guardian looked at its adopted child, seeing in him the same compassion that had moved it to take him in all those years ago. But it also saw something new, a strength that went beyond physical power, a courage born of love and empathy. There is something else you should know, Master Chen said quietly. The legends say that the moon lotus blooms only once every 100 years, for a single night. That night. He looked up at the temple's high windows. That night is 3 days from now, during the lunar eclipse. The guardian's scales shimmered with an inner light as it made its decision. Then we have no time to waste, it said, its voice ringing with renewed purpose. Kai, if you are truly willing to face these trials, we must prepare you. The path to the moon lotus is not just a physical journey. It will test every lesson I have taught you, every truth you think you know. Kai nodded, his young face solemn but unafraid. I'm ready. The guardian turned to Master Chen. Return. To the village, tell them. It paused, choosing its words carefully. Tell them hope is coming. But speak nothing of us. The trials are dangerous enough without human interference. As Master Chen hurried back through the crimson forest, the guardian began Kai's preparation. It taught him ancient chants that could ward off dark spirits, showed him how to read the stars to find his way, and most importantly, reminded him of the power of their bond. Remember, little ocean, the guardian said as they practiced into the night, the strongest magic comes from love. Not the easy love of peaceful days, but the fierce love that gives you courage when all hope seems lost. Whatever the trials throw at us, whatever they make us face, our bond is our greatest strength. And so, in the ancient temple under the Himalayan stars, a boy and his guardian prepared to embark on a journey that would test not just their courage and wisdom, but the very nature of their love. The mountain sickness continued to spread through Shangri-La, but now there was a flicker of hope, a hope born from the most unlikely of bonds between a child touched by destiny and a creature of ancient magic. As they practiced through the night, neither Kai nor the guardian could know the true price their journey would demand. But perhaps that's the nature of the most important choices. We make them not knowing the full cost, but knowing that the cost of doing nothing would be even greater. As Kai slept that night, exhausted from their preparations, the guardian kept watch under the starlit sky. The ancient creature's thoughts drifted to another time, another choice that had shaped its destiny. Perhaps it was time for Kai to understand the full truth of who and what his guardian truly was. The guardian's tale began over 1,000 years ago, in an age when magic flowed freely through the world like rivers of starlight. Back then, the guardian had been human, a young woman named Ming, the most promising apprentice to the greatest sage in all of China. Her story was one of transformation, sacrifice, and the eternal power of compassion. Ming had lived in a time of great turmoil, when dark sorcerers sought to harness the world's magic for their own cruel purposes. Her master, the sage of 10,000 years, protected an ancient artifact known as the Pearl of Creation, a relic said to hold the power to reshape reality itself. The dark sorcerers coveted this power, launching an assault on the sage's mountain. Sanctuary that would change everything. The battle was fierce, magic crackling through the air like lightning. Ming fought alongside her master, their combined powers holding back the tide of darkness. But in the final moment, when victory seemed within reach, she saw one of the dark sorcerers slip past their defenses, heading for the chamber where the pearl was kept. Ming made a choice in that instant, a choice that would echo through centuries. Instead of staying to help her master fight, she pursued the intruder. The chase led her deep into the sanctuary's heart, where the Pearl of Creation floated in a chamber of pure light. The dark sorcerer had already begun the ritual to claim the pearl's power when Ming burst in. She knew she had only seconds to act. Without hesitation, she threw herself between the sorcerer and the pearl, her own magic forming a protective barrier. But the sorcerer's spell had already taken hold. The resulting explosion of power was unlike anything the world had ever seen. The pearl's magic, the sorcerer's dark spell, and Ming's protective enchantment collided in a maelstrom of pure energy. When the light faded, the sorcerer was gone, reduced to ash. But Ming had been transformed. The pearl's power had changed her into a creature of pure magic, a great white python with scales that captured starlight and eyes that held the wisdom of ages. At first, she thought it was a curse, a punishment for her failure to protect the sanctuary, but her master, mortally wounded in the battle, saw it differently. "The pearl chose this form for you," he told her as he lay dying. "A guardian's form. Long after I'm gone, the world will need protectors, beings who understand both human heart and magical power. This is not your curse, my dear apprentice. It is your destiny." With his last breath, the sage entrusted Ming with a mission: to watch over the mountains, to protect the balance between the human and spiritual worlds, and to pass on the wisdom of the ages to those who would need it most. And so Ming became the guardian, taking up residence in the ancient temples that would become her home for centuries to come. Over the years, she learned to embrace her new form, discovering powers and abilities she never dreamed possible. She could sense the flow of magic through the earth, communicate with spirits, and even manipulate the very essence of life itself. But with these powers came loneliness, an isolation that stretched across centuries. She watched generations of humans come and go, saw empires rise and fall, witnessed the slow retreat of magic from the world. Yet she remained faithful to her duty, even as her existence faded into legend. The villages that sprang up in the mountains began to whisper stories about the great white python that protected them, not knowing that beneath those moonlit scales beat a heart that had once been human. Then came the night she found Kai, a night that changed everything. In that abandoned baby, she saw something she had not seen in centuries, a pure connection to the old magic, a bridge between worlds. Taking him in wasn't just an act of compassion, it was a recognition of kindred spirits. As the Guardian's thoughts returned to the present, watching Kai's peaceful sleep, it realized that perhaps this was why the pearl had transformed her all. Those centuries ago, not just to be a protector of ancient magic, but to be ready for this moment, to guide a child who might need both human understanding and magical wisdom. The journey they were about to undertake to the Temple of the Moon Lotus would be different from any challenge the Guardian had faced before. This wasn't just about protecting Kai or teaching him. It was about trusting him, believing in his strength, and being willing to let him face dangers that every instinct wanted to shield him from. The Guardian's scales shimmered with remembered power as it thought about the trials ahead. The trial of memory would force them both to confront their deepest fears: Kai's abandonment, the Guardian's transformation. The trial of truth would test their honesty with each other and themselves. The trial of sacrifice would demand choices no Guardian should have to make about their ward, and the trial of love. The Guardian's heart ached thinking about it. How could it prepare Kai for a test that might require them to be separated? How could it teach him that sometimes the greatest love means being willing to let go? But as the Guardian watched Kai stir slightly in his sleep, a small smile playing on his lips, it felt a surge of pride and hope. This boy, this remarkable child who had brought light back into its ancient existence, had already shown wisdom beyond his years. His compassion for the sick children of Shangri-La, his determination to help despite the dangers, these were not just signs of a brave heart, but of a soul that understood the true meaning of power. The Guardian had spent centuries guarding ancient magic, but Kai had taught it something even more valuable, that the greatest magic of all lies not in spells or transformations, but in the courage to love and the willingness to act on that love. As the night deepened, the Guardian began to understand that perhaps this journey wasn't just about saving the children of Shangri-La. Perhaps it was also about completing a cycle that had begun 1,000 years ago, with a young apprentice's choice to protect the pearl of creation. The power to reshape reality hadn't been lost that day. It had just taken a different form, manifesting in the bond between a magical guardian and a human child. The moon rose higher in the sky, its light catching the Guardian's scales and making them glow with an inner radiance. In less than 3 days, they would face challenges that would test every lesson, every bond, every truth they thought they knew. But for now, in the peaceful quiet of the temple, the Guardian allowed itself to feel not just the weight of its ancient duty, but the joy of having someone to share it with. Tomorrow would begin their preparation in earnest. The Guardian would need to teach Kai everything it had learned about the Temple of the Moon Lotus over the centuries, the paths that led there, the dangers that lurked in the highest peaks, the signs that would guide them through the trials. But more importantly, it would need to help him understand that their greatest strength lay not in magic or wisdom, but in their trust in each other. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, the Guardian made a silent promise, not to the long-dead sage who had given it its mission, not to the magic that had transformed it, but to the sleeping child who had transformed its heart. Whatever trials lay ahead, whatever sacrifices were demanded, their bond would endure. For in that bond lay a power greater than any pearl of creation, the power to change not just reality, but the very nature of love itself. The first rays of dawn painted the temple walls with stripes of gold as Kai began his training. The Guardian had devised a series of challenges that would prepare him for the trials ahead, each one designed to strengthen not just his body and mind, but his spirit. These weren't ordinary lessons. They were bridges between the human world and the realm of ancient magic. Their first task focused on understanding the language of the mountains themselves. The Guardian led Kai to a meditation chamber where crystal formations caught the morning light, creating dancing patterns on the walls. "Close your eyes," it instructed, its voice gentle but firm. Listen not with your ears, but with your heart. At first, Kai heard nothing but his own breathing and the whisper of wind through the temple. But gradually, as he settled deeper into meditation, other sounds emerged. The deep, slow pulse of the earth beneath them, the subtle song of crystals catching light, the whispered memories of countless prayers absorbed by the ancient stones. The mountains are alive, the guardian explained, its scales shimmering with reflected light. They remember every step taken upon them, every prayer whispered in their valleys, every tear shed in their shadows. To reach the temple of the moon, Lotus, you must learn to read these memories like a map. Hour after hour, they practiced. The guardian taught Kai to recognize the different voices of the mountain, the sharp, warning cry of loose rocks, the deep rumble that preceded an avalanche, the soft sigh of snow settling on ancient paths. Each sound was a story, each vibration a message that could mean the difference between life and death on their journey. But physical challenges awaited as well. In the temple's vast central chamber, the guardian created an obstacle course using its own body, weaving between pillars and creating spaces that Kai had to navigate. In the highest reaches, it explained, as Kai scrambled over its moonlit coils, the path to the moon lotus will be treacherous. You must learn to move like water, flowing around obstacles rather than fighting them. Kai threw himself into each task with determination. But it wasn't just his physical abilities that were being tested. The guardian watched closely, noting how he approached each challenge, how he handled failure, how he adapted to changing circumstances. These observations would be crucial in preparing him for the 4 trials that lay ahead. During their brief rest periods, the guardian shared stories of its centuries of watching over the mountains. It spoke of other seekers who had attempted the journey to the moon lotus, brave warriors, powerful mystics, desperate parents seeking cures for their children. None had returned, but instead of frightening Kai, these tales seemed to strengthen his resolve. What made them fail? He asked during one such break, wiping sweat from his brow. Was it because they weren't strong enough? The guardian's sapphire eyes held ancient wisdom as it replied, "Strength alone is never enough, little ocean. Many were strong, some were even powerful beyond measure. But the trials care nothing for physical might or magical power. They test something far more fundamental, the truth of one's heart." As the day progressed, their training evolved. The guardian began teaching Kai the sacred chants that could guide them through the spiritual barriers they would encounter. These weren't simple memorization exercises. Each chant had to be felt in the depths of one's being, had to resonate with absolute truth. Magic, the guardian explained, as Kai struggled with a particularly complex sequence, is not about forcing your will upon the world. It's about finding harmony between your intention and the natural flow of power. The chants work only when they emerge from a heart in perfect alignment with their purpose. But perhaps the most challenging lesson came as the sun began to set. The guardian led Kai to a part of the temple he had never seen before, a chamber, deep underground where darkness was absolute and the air hung heavy with centuries of silence. "The trial of memory will bring you to a place like this," the guardian said, its scales providing the only light in the darkness. "A place where you must face your deepest fears and most painful memories. We must prepare you for that darkness." Kai's voice trembled slightly as he asked, "How do you prepare for something like that?" "By understanding that darkness itself is not your enemy. Fear, pain, regret. These are not weaknesses to be conquered, but parts of yourself to be acknowledged and accepted. Only then can you move through them without being consumed. Hour after hour, they sat in that dark chamber. The Guardian taught Kai to recognize his fears without being ruled by them, to face his memories of abandonment without letting them define him. It was difficult, often painful work, but with each session, Kai's confidence grew stronger. As night fell fully outside, their training took on a different dimension. The Guardian began teaching Kai about the celestial alignments that would guide their journey. They stood in the temple courtyard, the Guardian's white scales reflecting starlight as it explained the significance of each constellation. The moon. Lotus blooms only when the stars align in a specific pattern, it said, its tail tracing patterns in the air. We must reach the temple precisely when the dragon star crosses the path of the phoenix, during the lunar eclipse. This alignment happens once every 100 years, and it marks the only time when the flower's magic can be harvested. But even as they studied the stars, the Guardian was teaching Kai something far more important than celestial navigation. Through each lesson, each challenge, each moment of guidance and encouragement, it was showing him the true meaning of unconditional love and support. When Kai stumbled, the Guardian was there to catch him. When he succeeded, it celebrated his victories with genuine joy. When he struggled with doubt or fear, it listened without judgment, offering wisdom wrapped in compassion. This wasn't just training for a physical journey, it was preparation for life itself. As midnight approached, they took a brief rest. By the temple pool, its surface reflecting the star-filled sky above. Kai, exhausted but satisfied with his progress, looked at his Guardian with curious eyes. "Why do you think I was chosen for this?" he asked softly. "Out of all the children who could have been left at the temple, why me?" The Guardian was quiet for a long moment, its sapphire eyes reflecting both starlight and ancient wisdom. "Perhaps," it said finally, "you weren't chosen at all. Perhaps you chose this path yourself, long before you were left at my door. The greatest destinies often aren't handed to us. They're born from the choices we make in our hearts." This answer seemed to satisfy Kai, who nodded thoughtfully. The Guardian watched as he traced patterns in the pool's surface, creating ripples that disturbed the reflected stars. In that simple action, it saw a metaphor for their entire journey, how a single choice, a single movement, could send ripples through the fabric of destiny itself. As the night deepened, their training continued with renewed focus. The Guardian knew that time was precious. They had less than 2 days now before the lunar eclipse. But watching Kai's determination, his growing confidence, his deepening understanding of the connection between physical action and spiritual truth, it felt a surge of hope. The boy who had been left at its door 7 years ago had grown into something remarkable. Not just a student or a ward, but a bridge between worlds. In teaching him, the Guardian had also learned, rediscovering truths about love, courage, and the endless capacity of the human spirit to rise above its limitations. As they prepared for their final training exercise of the night, the Guardian reflected on how far they had both come. This journey to the Moon Lotus wasn't just about saving the children of Shangri-La. It was about proving that the most powerful magic of all lies not in ancient artifacts or celestial alignments, but in the bond between two souls who choose to face life's greatest challenges together. On the eve of their departure, as twilight painted the mountains in shades of purple and gold, Kai found himself drawn to the temple's highest terrace. Here, where ancient prayer flags danced in the wind, he could see both the distant lights of Shangri-La and the towering peaks that guarded the temple of the moon lotus, two worlds, each calling to him in their own way. The Guardian found him there, its moonlit scales glowing softly in the gathering darkness. It noticed the subtle tension in Kai's shoulders, the way his eyes kept shifting between the village and the mountains. "Your thoughts trouble you, little ocean," it said, not as a question, but as a gentle invitation to share. Kai was quiet for a long moment, his young face reflecting a wisdom beyond his years. "I've been thinking about choices," he said finally. "About destiny and free will. You've always taught me that the greatest power lies in choosing our own path. But sometimes—" he gestured toward the distant peaks. "Sometimes it feels like the path chooses us." The Guardian coiled itself around the terrace, creating a protective circle that sheltered them both from the mountain winds. "Tell me what's really in your heart, Kai. What makes it feel heavy?" Kai turned to face his Guardian, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "What if we succeed? What if we get the moon lotus and save the children? Will everything just go back to how it was before, or—" he hesitated, then pushed forward. "Or will something change between us?" The question hung in the air like mountain mist, heavy with unspoken fears and deeper truths. The Guardian considered its response carefully, knowing that this moment could shape everything that was to come. "Change," it said finally, "is as natural as the flow of rivers or the turning of seasons. Fighting against it is like trying to hold back an avalanche. The question isn't whether things will change, but how we choose to face that change." But Kai wasn't satisfied with this philosophical answer. "The villagers," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "if we save their children, they'll want to know who I am, where I came from. They might want me to—" He couldn't finish the thought. The Guardian's heart ached with understanding. For 7 years, their world had been complete, just the two of them in their temple sanctuary. But now, as they prepared to step into a larger world, new possibilities and challenges were emerging. "Listen carefully, little ocean," the Guardian said, bringing its head down to Kai's level. "When I found you that night, I made a choice to become your guardian, not your cage. Love, true love, means wanting what's best for those we care about, even if that sometimes means watching them explore paths that lead away from us." Kai's eyes widened. "But I don't want to leave you, I just—" He struggled to find the words. "I sometimes wonder what it would be like to have friends my own age, to know where I came from, to understand why I was left here." The Guardian's scales shimmered with a gentle light, responding to the emotion in Kai's voice. "Those are natural desires, Kai. They don't diminish our bond. They're part of your growth, your journey to understanding yourself." But there was more troubling Kai's heart. "The trial of love," he said suddenly. "You said it requires breaking your own heart. Does that mean—" his voice caught, "does that mean we'll have to separate?" The Guardian was silent for a long moment, its ancient eyes filled with both love and sadness. The trials test not just our abilities, but our understanding of what love truly means. Sometimes the greatest act of love is being willing to let go, to trust that what is meant to be will find its way. Kai moved closer, placing his hand on the Guardian's scales. "But how can letting go be love? Doesn't love mean holding on tighter?" "Think of how you hold water," the Guardian replied. Cup your hands too tightly and it slips through your fingers. Hold them gently and it stays. True love is like that. It's not about possession or control, but about trust and freedom. As they sat together under the darkening sky, the guardian began sharing stories it had never told before, tales of other great loves it had witnessed over the centuries. It spoke of mountain flowers that bloomed in the harshest conditions, of birds that flew thousands of miles to return to their nesting grounds, of rivers that carved new paths through solid rock. Love takes many forms, it explained. The love between parent and child, between friends, between companions on a journey. Each is unique, each precious in its own way. But all true love shares one quality. It helps us grow into our best selves. Kai listened intently, finding comfort in these ancient tales, but a new question formed in his mind. Is that why you're willing to risk everything to help the village? Because love means helping others grow. The guardian's scales caught the last rays of sunlight, creating a cascade of colors. Partly, it admitted, but also because I've learned something important from raising you, Kai. The more we love, the more our capacity for love grows. Helping these children doesn't diminish our bond. It strengthens it by showing us what we're capable of together. As night fell fully around them, Kai and the guardian remained on the terrace, sharing thoughts and fears about the journey ahead. They spoke of courage and doubt, of destiny and choice, of the delicate balance between holding on and letting go. Whatever happens at the Temple of the Moon Lotus, Kai said finally, his voice stronger now, whatever the trials demand, of us, I want you to know that you'll always be my guardian, not because fate put us together, but because I choose it. The guardian felt its ancient heart swell with pride and love. In that moment, it saw not just the child it had raised, but the remarkable being he was becoming, someone who understood that love wasn't about dependency or possession, but about mutual growth and support. And you, little ocean, it replied softly, will always be my chosen one, not because I found you, but because every day we choose each other anew. As they prepared to return inside, to rest before their journey began, both felt a subtle shift in their relationship. The fears and doubts weren't gone, but they had been transformed, from shadows that threatened to separate them into bridges that connected them more deeply. Their bond, they realized, wasn't weakened by Kai's questions about his identity or his curiosity about the human world. Instead, it was strengthened by their ability to face these challenges together, to hold space for both certainty and doubt, for both belonging and independence. The guardian looked at Kai, seeing in him all the possibility of tomorrow, while cherishing every moment that had led to today. Whatever trials awaited them at the Temple of the Moon Lotus, they would face them with the understanding that true love isn't about avoiding change or preventing growth. It's about growing together, supporting each other's journey, and finding strength in both connection and independence. As they descended from the terrace, the stars began to appear above them, each one a reminder of the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. Their path to the Moon Lotus would test them in ways they couldn't imagine, but they would face those tests with the knowledge that their bond wasn't based on dependency or fear, but on the daily choice to support and believe in each other. In the end, that might be the greatest lesson of all, that love in its purest form is not about possession or control, but about the courage to stand together while allowing each other the freedom to grow and change. It was a lesson that would serve them well in the trials to come, a truth that would light their way through the darkest challenges they would face. Dawn broke over the mountains in a symphony of light, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of rose and gold. Kai and the Guardian stood at the temple's entrance, ready to begin their journey to the Temple of the Moon Lotus. But before they could take their first step, an unexpected visitor arrived, Master Chen, his face grave, with news that would change everything. "The mountain sickness," he said, catching his breath. "It's spreading faster than ever. 3 more children fell ill during the night, and Maya." He paused, his voice breaking. "The chief's daughter slips closer to the spirit world with each passing hour." The Guardian's scales rippled with concern, but before it could respond, something extraordinary happened. The morning sunlight struck the temple's central crystal, creating a cascade of rainbow light that surrounded them. As the light touched the Guardian's scales, they began to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. Kai watched in amazement as the air around them seemed to thicken with ancient magic. The Guardian's form began to change, its serpentine body elongating and transforming. The process wasn't like the violent transformations of dark magic. This was like watching starlight take human form. Where the great white python had been, now stood a woman of ethereal beauty. Her hair flowed like liquid moonlight, and her eyes retained their brilliant sapphire hue. She wore robes that seemed woven from starlight itself, and an aura of ancient power surrounded her like a gentle mist. Master Chen fell to his knees in shock, but Kai stepped forward, drawn by an instinct he couldn't explain. You're still you," he said softly, reaching out to touch her hand. "I can feel it." The Guardian, now in her human form, smiled warmly. "Yes, little ocean. This is who I was before time and magic changed me. This is Ming, the apprentice who chose to protect the pearl of creation at the cost of her human form." She turned to Master Chen, who remained kneeling in awe. "Rise, old friend. What you witness now is not just magic, but the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. The alignment of the stars, the return of the mountain sickness, Kai's presence in our lives, all of these are threads in a tapestry woven by destiny itself." But as she spoke these words, the crystal's light began to pulse with increasing intensity. Ming's face grew serious as she recognized the signs. "The temple is trying to tell us something," she said, placing her hands on the crystal's surface, "something about the true nature of our journey." The crystal's light formed images in the air around them, scenes from the past, present, and possible futures. They saw the moment Ming was transformed, the night she found Kai, and shadowy glimpses of the trials that awaited them at the temple of the Moon Lotus. "I understand now," Ming said, her voice filled with wonder. "The transformation isn't just about changing forms. It's about the power of love to transform us from within. Each trial we face isn't just a test of our abilities, but of our capacity to grow and change while remaining true to who we are." Kai watched the images swirling around them, his young mind grasping truths that many adults might miss. "Like how you're different now, but still my guardian," he said. "Change doesn't have to mean losing what matters most." Ming knelt before him, taking his small hands in hers. "Exactly, little ocean, and that's why the Temple of the Moon Lotus chose this moment to reveal these truths. The trials ahead will test not just our courage or wisdom, but our understanding of transformation itself." The crystal's light showed them more, visions of the sick children in Shangri-La, their life force dimming like candles in the wind. But it also showed something else, a golden thread of energy connecting Kai to each of them, pulsing with the same rhythm as his heart. Master Chen gasped as he recognized the significance. The prophecy spoke of a child whose heart could bridge worlds, he said. We thought it meant between the human and spirit realms, but it's more than that, isn't it? Ming nodded, her eyes filled with both pride and concern. Kai's connection to these children isn't just sympathy or compassion, it's a resonance of souls. The mountain sickness isn't just a disease, it's a call for balance between the magical and human worlds. And Kai, my precious ward, may be the key to restoring that balance. But this revelation came with its own weight of responsibility. The crystal's light showed them the path ahead, treacherous mountain passes, spiritual barriers, and the 4 trials that guarded the moon lotus. Each challenge seemed more impossible than the last. The trials will test this connection, Ming explained, her voice gentle but firm. They'll force us to confront not just our fears or doubts, but our assumptions about what transformation truly means. Are we ready for that, little ocean? Kai stood straighter, his young face set with determination. I'm ready, he said, not just because of destiny or prophecies, but because it's the right thing to do. Because sometimes the greatest transformation comes from choosing to help others, even when it's hard. Ming felt her heart swell with pride and love. In that moment, she understood that her own transformation, from human to python to this, a current form, had been preparing her for this moment. Each change had taught her something essential about the nature of love and growth. Then it's time, she said, rising to her full height. The crystal's light began to fade, but its revelations remained etched in their hearts. Master Chen returned to the village. Tell them that help is coming, but also tell them this. True healing requires more than just medicine or magic. It requires a willingness to transform, to grow, to see the world and each other in new ways. As Master Chen hurried back to Shangri-La, Ming and Kai prepared for their journey with renewed purpose. The Guardian's human form wasn't just a physical change. It was a symbol of the transformative power of love and courage. Remember, little ocean, Ming said as they took their first steps toward the distant peaks. The greatest transformations often come not from outside forces, but from the choices we make in our hearts. Whatever changes we face, whatever trials lie ahead, our bond will remain our strongest magic. Together, they began their ascent into the mountains, leaving behind the safety of the temple for the unknown challenges ahead. The morning sun caught Ming's silvery hair and Kai's determined face, creating a tableau of hope and possibility. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful transformations come not from ancient magic or cosmic alignments, but from the simple choice to face life's challenges together with open hearts and unwavering love. The ascent through the mountains was unlike anything Kai had ever experienced. Each step brought them closer to the heavens, where the air grew thin and the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds began to blur. Ming, in her human form, moved with grace that seemed to defy the harsh terrain, while Kai found himself drawing on every lesson she had taught him over the years. Their first real challenge came at the Bridge of Whispers, a narrow span of ancient stone that crossed a bottomless chasm. As they approached, the wind carried voices, echoes of all who had attempted this crossing before. Some were filled with determination, others with fear, and many with regret. Listen carefully, Ming instructed, her silver hair dancing in the wind. The voices aren't just memories. They're warnings and guides. Each one has something to teach us about the path ahead. Kai closed his eyes, focusing as he had been taught. Among the chorus of whispers, he began to distinguish patterns. Some spoke of hidden paths, others of dangerous shortcuts that led to doom. But one voice, barely audible, caught his attention. "The bridge is like life itself," he said, repeating what he heard. "It's not about reaching the other side, but about how we choose to cross." Ming smiled, pride shining in her sapphire eyes. "And how do you choose to cross, little ocean?" Kai studied the ancient stones, noting how some seemed more worn than others. "Together," he said firmly, "side by side, step by step, the voices that speak of failure, they all tried to cross. Alone." This insight proved valuable as they made their way across. The bridge swayed beneath them, and more than once a stone crumbled away into the abyss. But they moved as one, their steps synchronized, their balance shared. When Kai faltered, Ming steadied him. When the wind threatened to topple them, they braced each other. Reaching the other side, they found themselves in a valley unlike any Kai had seen in his 7 years of life. Crystal formations jutted from the ground like frozen flames, each one humming with its own unique tone. The combined sound created a melody that seemed to speak directly to the soul. "The Valley of Resonance," Ming explained, her voice carrying a note of reverence. "This place remembers every truth ever spoken, every lie ever told." The crystals react to the authenticity of one's heart. As if to demonstrate, she approached one of the larger formations. The crystal's hum changed pitch, creating a harmony with her presence. But when Kai stepped forward, something extraordinary happened. The crystals didn't just hum, they began to glow with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. "The crystals," he gasped. "They're like the sick children in the village. I can feel their energy, their life force." Ming watched in amazement as the entire valley began to resonate with Kai's presence. The prophecy about his ability to bridge worlds was proving truer than anyone could have imagined. But before she could respond, a new sound cut through the crystal song. Voices, human voices, coming from the path ahead. They crested a small rise to find something unexpected, a group of pilgrims from another village huddled around a makeshift camp. Among them was a young girl about Kai's age, her face pale with the same sickness that plagued the children of Shangri-La. The pilgrims reacted with surprise and suspicion at their appearance, but the sick girl's eyes locked onto Kai with immediate recognition. "You're like me," she said softly. "You can hear the mountains singing." Her name was Lian, and her story was both different from and similar to the children in Shangri-La. She had been born with the ability to sense the magic that flowed through the mountains, but this gift had become a curse as the natural balance shifted. Her parents had brought her on this pilgrimage seeking healing, following rumors of the Moon Lotus. As Kai sat with Lian, sharing stories and experiences, Ming observed their interaction with growing understanding. The connection between them was immediate and profound. Two young souls who understood what it meant to exist between worlds. "The mountain sickness," Lian explained to Kai. "It's not just in our villages. It's spreading throughout all the high places, affecting children who can sense the old magic. Some say it's because the balance between the human and spirit worlds is breaking down." This information added new urgency to their quest, but it also provided unexpected hope. As Kai and Lian talked, the crystal formations around them began to harmonize in a way Ming had never witnessed before. The very ground seemed to pulse with healing energy. Your friendship, Ming realized aloud. It's creating a natural resonance, the kind of harmony that once existed between all things. The pilgrims, who had initially been wary, gathered around to witness this phenomenon. Among them was an elderly woman, a healer from their village, who studied Kai with wise eyes. "There is an old saying," she said, her voice carrying the weight of generations. "When the mountains sicken, they will call to those who can hear their song. When those voices unite, healing will begin." As night fell, the two groups shared a meal together, exchanging stories and knowledge. The pilgrims spoke of other villages, affected by the sickness, of other children who could hear the mountain's song. Each tale added another piece to the puzzle they were trying to solve. Kai and Lian sat slightly apart from the others, their presence causing the nearby crystals to create a gentle, protective harmony. "Do you think we'll make it to the moon lotus in time?" Lian asked, her voice weak but hopeful. Kai took her hand, and the crystal song strengthened. "We have to," he said with quiet determination. "Not just for us, but for all the children who can hear the mountains. We're not alone anymore." Ming watched this interaction with mixed emotions. She saw in Kai's connection with Lian something beautiful and necessary, a reminder that their journey wasn't just about saving one village, but about restoring balance to the entire mountain realm. Yet she also felt the first stirrings of the change she knew must come, the beginning of Kai's growth beyond their protected world of two. As the pilgrims settled in for the night, Ming took Kai aside. The crystal lights painted their faces in shifting patterns as she shared an important truth. "What you and Lian share," she said gently, "it's a reminder of something I've always known, but sometimes struggled to accept. Love grows not by holding tight, but by creating space for new connections, new understanding. Your ability to form this bond to help another soul in pain, it doesn't diminish what we share. It proves that the lessons of love and compassion I tried to teach have taken root in your heart." Kai hugged her tightly. "You taught me that real strength comes from being open to others, from being willing to help even when it's hard." Meeting Lian, feeling how our energies work together. It's like finding a piece of a puzzle I didn't know was incomplete. As they prepared to continue their journey the next morning, the pilgrims offered to accompany them part way, sharing their knowledge of the paths ahead. Ming agreed, understanding that sometimes the greatest progress comes from accepting help from unexpected sources. Before they left, Lian pressed something into Kai's hand, a small crystal that hummed with their shared resonance. "So you remember," she said, "that even when we're apart, our songs are connected." This gift would prove more valuable than any of them could have imagined, for it represented something essential about their quest. The path to the moon lotus wasn't just about reaching a destination or obtaining a cure. It was about rediscovering the connections that bound all things together, about healing not just bodies, but the very fabric of understanding between the human and spirit worlds. As they resumed their journey, the crystal song of the valley fading behind them, Ming reflected on how this unexpected encounter had changed their quest. What had begun as a mission to save one village had expanded into something greater, a journey to restore balance to all the mountains, to help all the children who could hear the ancient songs. The path ahead would still be dangerous, the Trials still daunting, but they moved forward with renewed purpose. For in finding others who shared their struggle, they had discovered something precious, the knowledge that even the greatest challenges become manageable when faced with understanding. Hearts and willing hands. The Temple of the Moon. Lotus loomed before them, its ancient spires piercing the clouds like silver arrows reaching for the stars. The lunar eclipse was mere hours away, and the air thrummed with magical energy. Ming and Kai stood at the temple's entrance, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that the most difficult part of their journey was about to begin. The crystal lian had given Kai pulsed with an urgent rhythm, resonating with the countless children whose lives hung in the balance. Its song was joined by the whispers of the temple itself, ancient voices speaking of choices, sacrifices, and the price of true healing. "The trials begin here," Ming said softly, her human form glowing with an inner light that seemed to challenge the gathering darkness. "Remember, little ocean, whatever happens inside, whatever we face, trust in what we've built together." As they stepped through the massive doors, the temple came alive around them. Ancient runes carved into the walls began to glow, and the air grew thick with magic, older than time itself. The first trial chamber lay before them, its entrance marked by an arch of crystalline light. "The trial of memory," Ming explained, her voice echoing in the sacred space. "We must face our deepest fears, our most painful memories. But remember, memories have power only if we let them control us." They stepped through the arch together, and the world dissolved into shadows. Kai found himself reliving the moment of his abandonment, not just seeing it, but feeling every emotion as if for the first time. The cold night air, the sensation of being utterly alone, the overwhelming fear of a newborn left to the mercy of the mountains. But something was different this time. Through the haze of memory, he felt Ming's presence, not as the guardian who had found him, but as someone who had also known the pain of transformation and loss. Their shared understanding created a bridge across the darkness. "Our memories don't define us," Kai said firmly, his voice cutting through the shadows. "They're part of our story, but we choose what that story means." The shadows retreated, unable to maintain their hold in the face of such clarity. The first trial had been passed not through denial or resistance, but through acceptance and understanding. The second chamber presented the trial of truth, where every lie ever told materialized as physical barriers. But Kai and Ming had built their relationship on honesty, even when that honesty was difficult. They moved through the barriers like water flowing around rocks, their truths creating paths where none seemed possible. The third trial, however, the trial of sacrifice, tested them in ways they hadn't expected. The chamber showed them visions of possible futures. Kai growing up in Shangri-La, beloved by the villagers, living a normal human life. Ming returning to her original human form permanently, free from her centuries of guardianship. "The moon. Lotus offers more than just healing," a voice echoed through the chamber. "It offers the chance to rewrite destiny itself, but each gift comes with a price. To save the children, one of you must sacrifice your deepest desire." The crystal in Kai's hand pulsed stronger, carrying with it the echoes of Lian's voice and the hopes of all the sick children. Ming looked at her ward, seeing in him the strength she had helped nurture and the wisdom he had found on his own. "I know what I want most," Kai said, his voice unwavering. "I want us to stay together as guardian and ward, exactly as we are." That's my deepest desire." He held up the crystal, its light illuminating his determined face. "But there are some things more important than what we want for ourselves." Ming felt tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of profound pride. "You've learned the hardest lesson of all, little ocean. Sometimes the greatest love means being willing to let go." Together, they stepped forward and placed their hands on the chamber's central altar. "We choose to sacrifice our life as it was," they said in unison. "Not because we don't cherish it, but because love means being willing to grow beyond our own desires." The chamber filled with blinding light, and when it faded, they found themselves facing the final trial, the trial of love. Here, the temple's magic stripped away all pretense, all protection, leaving them with nothing but the truth of their hearts. To reach the moon lotus, the temple's voice pronounced, one must remain behind, trapped in this chamber for eternity. Only through this separation can the flower's magic be released. The choice seemed impossible. Everything they had faced, every challenge they had overcome, had been done together. The thought of eternal separation was more painful than any physical wound. But Kai, holding the crystal that connected him to all the suffering children, understood something profound. "Love isn't just about being together," he said, turning to Ming. "It's about the courage to do what's right, even when it breaks your heart." Ming knelt before him, her human form shimmering with emotion. "Let me stay," she said. "I've lived for centuries. You have your whole life ahead of you." But Kai shook his head, a wisdom far beyond his years shining in his eyes. "You've taught me that true strength comes from putting others first. The children need you, not just to get the moon lotus, but to help them understand their gifts, to teach them what you taught me." Before Ming could protest, Kai stepped into the chamber's center. The crystal in his hand began to glow brighter than ever, its light mixing with his own inner radiance. "This isn't an ending," he said, his voice strong and clear. "It's a transformation, just like when you changed from a python to save me. Now I choose to change, to save others." As he spoke these words, something extraordinary happened. The crystal's light expanded, filling the chamber with a symphony of color and sound. The temple of the moon, Lotus itself, seemed to respond, its ancient magic recognizing something it had waited centuries to find, a heart pure enough to love without conditions, to sacrifice without regret. The temple's voice spoke again, but this time with wonder rather than judgment. "The trial of love is not about separation," it revealed. "It is about the willingness to separate for the greater good. In choosing to sacrifice yourself for others, you have proven that your love is true and pure." The chamber filled with blinding light once more. But this time, when it faded, both Kai and Ming remained. Above them, emerging from the temple's highest spire, the moon lotus began to bloom, its petals opening like stars being born. "You have passed all trials," the temple proclaimed, "not through power or cleverness, but through the purity of your hearts. The moon lotus offers its healing not just to the children of the mountains, but to the very balance of magic itself." As they gathered the precious flower, its petals glowing with healing light, Ming and Kai understood that they had discovered something profound about the nature of love and sacrifice. True love wasn't about holding on at all costs. It was about being willing to let go for the right reasons, about choosing the greater good, even when it meant facing your deepest fears. The crystal in Kai's hand hummed with joy, its song carrying the promise of healing to all the children connected to its resonance. They had succeeded not by fighting against the trials, but by embracing their deeper meaning. by understanding that sometimes the greatest victories come not from avoiding sacrifice, but from choosing it willingly, with an open heart and unwavering courage. The descent from the Temple of the Moon Lotus was unlike anything Ming or Kai had experienced. The Moon Lotus, cradled in a crystal vessel, pulsed with a light that seemed to bend reality itself. Each petal held enough power to heal not just the children of Shangri-La, but to restore balance to the entire mountain realm. As they made their way down through clouds tinged with dawn's first light, both guardian and ward could feel the changes beginning. The crystal lian had given Kai hummed with increasing intensity, its song spreading through the mountains like ripples in a pond. Everywhere its resonance touched, the sickness began to loosen its hold. But the most profound changes were happening within Kai himself. The trials had awakened something in him, a deeper understanding of his connection to both the human and spiritual worlds. The mountain winds seemed to whisper secrets to him now, and every step he took left traces of healing energy in its wake. "You're becoming what you were always meant to be," Ming observed, her human form glowing with pride. A bridge between worlds, a healer of the divide that caused the sickness in the first place. They reached the Valley of Resonance just as the sun crested the eastern peaks. The crystal formations that had sung for them before now erupted in a symphony of light and sound, responding to the Moon Lotus's presence. To their surprise, they found the valley wasn't empty. Word had spread through the mountain villages. Families had brought their sick children, drawn by an instinct they couldn't explain. Among them was Lian, her face pale but her eyes bright with hope. The crystal she had given Kai had connected them all, creating a network of healing that spanned the mountains. As Kai stepped into the valley, the Moon Lotus's light intensified. The crystal formations amplified its power, creating a cascading effect that touched every sick child present. One by one, color returned to pale cheeks. Labored breathing eased. Eyes that had been dulled by sickness began to shine. But the healing wasn't just physical. As the children recovered, they began to understand their gift, the ability to hear the mountain's song wasn't a curse to be cured, but a blessing to be understood and nurtured. The sickness had been a symptom of imbalance, of the growing disconnect between human and spiritual worlds. Ming watched in amazement as Kai moved among the children, helping each one understand their newly awakened abilities. He had become not just a healer, but a teacher, showing them how to listen to the mountain's voice, how to find harmony between their human nature and their spiritual gifts. The Moon Lotus didn't just cure us, Lian realized, standing stronger now. It helped us understand who we are, who we're meant to be. The news spread quickly through the mountains. More families arrived, bringing not just sick children, but also those who had always felt different, who had always sensed there was more to the world than what most people could see. The Valley of Resonance became a gathering place, a sanctuary where the human and spiritual worlds could meet. But with this healing came difficult choices. The very success of their mission meant that change was inevitable. The isolated life Kai had known with Ming in their temple could never be quite the same. Too many people needed what they could teach, what they understood about bridging worlds. "I always knew this day would come," Ming said softly one evening as they watched the children practice their newly understood abilities. "From the moment I found you, I knew you were meant for more than just our quiet life together." Kai took her hand, feeling the warmth that lay beneath her human form. "Everything I am, everything I can do to help these children." It's because of you. You didn't just save me that night. You showed me what it means to use power with wisdom and love." The changes rippled outward like waves in a pond. The village of Shangri-La, once fearful of the ancient temples and their magic, began to open itself to new possibilities. Master Chen established a school where children with gifts could learn to understand and control their abilities. Ming and Kai were often there, sharing their wisdom and experience. But the greatest transformation was in how people began to see the relationship between the human and spiritual worlds. The mountains were no longer just a place of mystery and danger. They became a reminder of the delicate balance that existed between all things. The crystal formations in the Valley of Resonance became symbols of this harmony, their song a constant reminder of the connection between worlds. Kai grew into his role naturally, moving between the temple where he had been raised and the communities that needed his guidance. He never forgot the lessons of the trials, the understanding that true power comes not from control, but from the willingness to serve something greater than yourself. Ming, too, found herself transformed by their success. The centuries of solitude had given way to a new purpose, helping others understand the very things she had taught Kai. Her ability to shift between serpent and human form became not just a magical ability, but a teaching tool, showing others that transformation was nothing to fear. The crystal network that had begun with Lian's gift grew stronger and more complex. Children from different villages learned to communicate through the resonance, sharing their experiences and supporting each other as they grew into their abilities. What had started as a desperate quest for healing had become a revolution in understanding. But perhaps the most beautiful consequence was how their story began to change the way people thought about love and guardianship. The bond between Ming and Kai became legendary. Not because it was magical, but because it showed how love could transform both the giver and receiver, how it could expand to include others without diminishing its original strength. Years later, when asked about the choices they had made, about the risks they had taken and the changes they had embraced, Kai would always smile and point to the crystal formations that still sang their eternal song. "The greatest power isn't in changing the world," he would say. "It's in being willing to be changed by it. Every challenge we face, every choice we make, shapes us into who we're meant to become. The trick is to face those changes with an open heart and the courage to grow." Ming, whether in her serpent or human form, would add her own wisdom. Love isn't about holding on to what was, it's about nurturing what can be. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give those we care about is the courage to become their truest selves. And so their story became more than just a tale of healing or magic. It became a testament to the power of transformation, how the willingness to change, to grow, to face the unknown with courage and compassion could ripple outward to touch countless lives. The moon lotus had cured the mountain sickness, but it was their example that showed others how to maintain the harmony they had helped restore. The temple where Ming had found Kai remained their home, but it was no longer a place of isolation. It became a beacon of hope, a reminder that the most powerful magic of all lies not in ancient artifacts or mystical flowers, but in the simple choice to face life's challenges with an open heart and unwavering love. 20 years passed like autumn leaves carried on mountain winds. The Temple of Harmony, as it came to be known, stood as a testament to the extraordinary journey of a guardian and child who had changed the very nature of magic in the mountains. The crystal formations that once sang only in the Valley of Resonance now sparkled throughout the ranges, their music a constant reminder of the balance between worlds. Kai, no longer the small boy found on a temple doorstep, had grown into a remarkable man. His presence carried both strength and gentleness, like a mountain stream that could either nurture valleys or carve through stone. The children he had helped heal had grown up too, many becoming teachers themselves, spreading the wisdom of harmony between the human and spiritual realms. Ming, whether in her serpentine or human form, remained by his side, though their relationship had evolved into something even more beautiful than before. They were no longer just guardian and ward, but partners in maintaining the delicate balance they had helped restore. Their bond had become a symbol of how love could grow and change while remaining unshakably true. On the 20th anniversary of their journey to the Moon Lotus, people gathered from all corners of the mountain realm to celebrate. The Temple of Harmony's courtyard was filled with families, each carrying their own stories of transformation. Among them was Lian, now a respected healer, whose original gift of a resonating crystal had helped spark a revolution in understanding. As twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Kai stood before the assembled crowd. The crystal network hummed with anticipation, carrying his words to even the most distant villages. 20 years ago, he began, his voice carrying the wisdom of experience. I thought our journey was about finding a cure. I thought we needed to fix something that was broken. He smiled, looking at Ming, who stood nearby in her human form. What I didn't understand then was that sometimes what we see as broken is really just waiting to be transformed. The crystal formations caught the fading sunlight, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the gathered faces. Each light seemed to carry memories of the changes that had swept through the mountains. Children learning to embrace their gifts, villages opening their hearts to ancient wisdom, the barriers between human and spiritual worlds gradually dissolving. The true magic, Kai continued, wasn't in the Moon Lotus or even in our ability to hear the mountain's song. It was in our willingness to grow, to change, to become more than what we thought possible. He gestured to the people assembled before him. Each of you carries that same magic. Every time you choose love over fear, growth over comfort, understanding over judgment, you keep the harmony alive. Ming stepped forward, her presence adding weight to his words. When I found Kai that night, I thought I was saving him, she said, her voice carrying centuries of wisdom. And what I didn't realize was that by opening my heart to him, I was also saving myself. Every act of love creates ripples we can't foresee, touching lives we may never know. The crystal network pulsed with agreement, carrying emotions and memories through its intricate web of connections. Stories began to flow, of children who had once been sick, now teaching others to understand their gifts, of villages that had once lived in fear, now celebrating their connection to the spiritual world, of families transformed by the understanding that difference wasn't a curse, but a blessing. Lin shared her own story of how that first crystal she had given Kai had taught her about the power of small acts of kindness. I was just a sick child offering comfort to another, she said. I had no idea that simple gesture would help create this network of healing and understanding that now spans the mountains. As night fell, the gathering transformed into a celebration of all they had achieved. The crystal formations created natural music, their harmonies reflecting the joy of the moment. Children too young to remember the time of sickness danced with elderly villagers who had witnessed the entire transformation. The barriers of age, village, and even world seemed to dissolve in the shared joy of the moment. Kai and Ming stood slightly apart, watching the celebration unfold. The moon, Lotus's magic, had long since been absorbed into the fabric of the mountain realm, but its effects continued to ripple outward. Every new child born with the ability to hear the mountain's song was now welcomed as a gift. Their abilities, nurtured rather than feared. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Kai asked softly, looking at his guardian and dearest friend. Ming's eyes sparkled with both human warmth and ancient wisdom. "The most powerful transformations are often the ones we can't imagine beforehand," she replied. "That's why courage is so important. Not just the courage to face danger, but the courage to embrace change, to trust in the possibility of something better." Their conversation was interrupted by a group of young students from the Temple of Harmony's school. These children, unlike those of the past, didn't need healing. They needed understanding, guidance, and wisdom to use their gifts responsibly. They gathered around Kai and Ming, eager to hear once again the story of how everything had changed. But this time, the story wasn't just about a guardian and child seeking a magical flower. It was about the power of choice, the strength found in vulnerability, and the endless possibilities that open up when we dare to question our limitations. It was about how every ending could be a beginning, how every challenge could be an opportunity for growth. As Kai shared their tale, the crystal formations seemed to sing with renewed vigor, their light painting pictures in the air of the journey they had taken. But more importantly, they showed visions of journeys yet to come, of new understandings to be reached, new harmonies to be discovered, new bridges to be built between worlds. "The greatest magic," Kai concluded, looking at the young faces around him, "isn't in what we can do, it's in what we can become. Every one of you carries that potential. The ability to transform not just yourselves, but the world around you through your choices, your courage, and your love." Ming, watching, the hope and determination dawning in those young eyes, felt a deep sense of completion. The prophecy that had spoken of a child who could bridge worlds had been fulfilled, but not in the way anyone had expected. Instead of a single bridge, they had helped create countless connections, each one unique and precious. As the celebration continued into the night, the stars seemed to shine with particular brightness over the Temple of Harmony. The mountain winds carried the music of celebration to every corner of the realm, a reminder that the most powerful transformations often start with a single choice, a single act of love. The legacy of their journey lived on not just in stories or songs, but in the daily choices of all those who had been touched by their example. Each time someone chose understanding over fear, growth over stagnation, love over isolation, they added their own note to the endless symphony of transformation that had begun with a guardian's choice to save an abandoned child. And so their story became more than just a tale of magic and healing. It became a beacon of hope, a reminder that within every challenge lies the seed of transformation, within every ending the possibility of a new beginning. The mountains would continue to sing their ancient songs, but now those songs carried a new message, that the greatest magic of all lies not in unchanging power, but in the endless capacity of love to transform, heal, and create new possibilities. As the story of Ming and Kai spread through generations, their legacy took root in unexpected ways. 50 years after their journey to the moon Lotus, the mountains had become a place where magic and humanity not only coexisted, but flourished together. The Temple of Harmony stood as a beacon of hope, but it was far from the only testament to their transformative journey. In the highest peaks, where the air grew thin and the stars seemed close enough to touch, a new generation of guardians had emerged. These weren't just the children who could hear the mountain's song. They were the ones who had learned to sing back, to weave their own harmonies into the ancient melodies of the world. Among them was Luna, Lian's granddaughter, who had inherited not just her grandmother's gift for healing, but also the very first crystal that had connected the mountain communities. Now enhanced by decades of accumulated magic, the crystal had become the heart of a vast network that spanned not just the Himalayas, but reached out to similar communities across the world. Luna stood at the temple's highest observation point, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of amber and rose. Below her, students from every corner of the globe gathered in the courtyards, each bringing their own unique gifts to add to the symphony of magic that flowed through the peaks. "They say the mountains remember," a familiar voice spoke behind her. It was Ming, who had chosen to remain in her human form more often as the years passed, though she never lost the ability to transform into the majestic white python when needed. Her hair had remained the color of moonlight, and her sapphire eyes still held the wisdom of centuries. "What do they remember?" Luna asked, though she had heard the stories countless times. Each telling revealed new layers, new truths that only time and experience could illuminate. Ming smiled, her ageless face reflecting both the past and the future. "They remember every choice that led us here, every moment of courage, every act of love, every decision to trust in the possibility of something better." The crystal in Luna's hand pulsed gently, resonating with Ming's words. Through it, she could feel the echo of that first journey, the fear, the hope, the unwavering determination that had changed everything. But more than that, she could feel the countless journeys that had followed, each adding its own note to the endless song of transformation. Below them, Kai emerged from the temple's main hall, his hair now streaked with silver, but his spirit as bright as ever. He was surrounded by a group of young students, each bearing their own crystals, each seeking to understand their place in the continuing story of magic and humanity. "Watch," Ming said softly, gesturing to the scene below. Kai gathered the students in a circle, and together they began a ceremony that had become tradition in the Temple of Harmony. Each student placed their crystal in the center, creating a mandala of light and sound. As their energies combined, the very air seemed to shimmer with possibility. "This is what we learned all those years ago," Ming explained to Luna. "True power doesn't come from any one person or any single act of magic. It comes from our willingness to share our gifts, to let them blend and grow with others." The crystal formation in the valley below began to sing in harmony with the students' ceremony, their light creating patterns that danced across the mountain slopes. Each pattern told a story of healing, of growth, of bridges built between worlds that had once seemed forever separate. "But that's not the most important lesson, is it?" Luna asked, understanding dawning in her eyes. Ming shook her head. "No, little one. The most important lesson is that transformation never ends. Each generation adds its own verse to the song, its own understanding to the wisdom of the ages." As if to demonstrate this truth, a new sound began to emerge from the crystal network, not the familiar harmonies they had grown used to, but something different, something that spoke of changes yet to come. The students below looked up in wonder as their crystals began to pulse with this new rhythm. "Do you feel it?" Kai called up to them, his voice carrying the excitement of discovery. "The mountains are singing a new song. They're telling us it's time for the next chapter." Luna closed her eyes, letting the vibrations flow through her. In the crystal's resonance, she could feel connections forming with places far beyond the mountains. Deserts where ancient magic slept beneath the sands, forests where spirits danced in dappled shadows, oceans where mysteries deeper than time itself waited to be understood. "This is why your story never really ended," she said to Ming. "It just kept growing, didn't it? Like rings in a tree or ripples in a pond." Ming nodded, her eyes reflecting the light of countless possibilities. "Every ending is just a beginning. In disguise, what Kai and I started wasn't meant to stop with us. It was meant to evolve, to grow, to transform with each new heart that opens to its truth." As the morning progressed, more students and teachers gathered in the courtyards below. They came from every tradition, every culture, every understanding of magic and spirit. Each brought their own gifts, their own songs to add to the ever-growing symphony of transformation. The crystal network hummed with their combined energy, creating bridges not just between places but between ways of seeing and understanding the world. Through it all, the original crystal that Lian had given Kai continued to pulse with its simple, profound truth, that the greatest magic lies not in power or knowledge, but in the courage to remain open to change. "Look there," Ming pointed to, where the mountain peaks seemed to touch the clouds. A group of young guardians was practicing their most challenging skill, the ability to shift between forms, to understand the world from different perspectives. Like Ming, they had learned that true wisdom comes from embracing all aspects of themselves. "They're not just changing shape," Luna observed. "They're changing the way they see everything." "Exactly," Ming smiled. "That's the real legacy of our journey, not just the healing of the mountain sickness or the building of the Temple of Harmony, but the understanding that true transformation is always possible, always waiting for those with the courage to embrace it." As the day continued, the Temple of Harmony lived up to its name in ways its founders could never have imagined. The crystal network carried songs of healing to distant lands, while new students arrived with gifts and insights that added fresh dimensions to their understanding of magic. But perhaps the most beautiful sight was in the simple moments. Young children learning to hear the mountain song for the first time, elderly masters sharing wisdom gathered over decades, and everywhere the endless dance of transformation, as each soul found its own way to add to the harmony. "The story goes on," Ming said softly, watching the scene below with eyes that had witnessed centuries of change. "It lives in every heart that chooses love over fear, growth over stagnation, possibility over limitation." Luna held up her grandmother's crystal, watching the light play through its facets. "And it begins again with every choice we make." "Yes," Ming agreed, her voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom and the lightness of eternal hope. "That's the true magic, not in what we can do, but in what we choose to become. Every day, every moment, we have the chance to transform ourselves and our world." As the sun reached its zenith, casting no shadows in the temple courtyards, the mountains themselves seemed to sing with the truth of these words. The story that had begun with a guardian's choice to save an abandoned child had grown into something far greater, an endless symphony of transformation an eternal dance of possibility that would continue as long as there were hearts brave enough to embrace change and souls wise enough to understand that love, in all its forms, was the greatest magic of all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.